Hi, and welcome to the CDNify podcast, where we discuss all things related to front-end optimization, web performance, and emerging technologies.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and I'm joined with Peter James. He's the chairman and co-founder of hosting service Ninefold, director of Australian ISP iiNet, and chairman of telecommunications company Macquarie Telecom. So today we're going to be talking about open source languages, web performance, and businesses in Australia. So to get things started, do you mind telling everyone a little bit about yourself, Peter?
Thank you, Jamie, and hello, everyone. Look, as I was saying before, all I've ever done in business is technology, and I go back to the days of, believe it or not, punch paper tape and punch cards. What I love about technology is how it enables people to connect, to change lives, and to build new business models, which are constantly changing. So it's I call it the thrill of the chase, Jamie, about trying to stay, I wouldn't say ahead of the curve, but trying to stay with the curve of the internet, of the web, and of the connected world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're actually based in Australia, and it seems like quite an interesting place to start a business, as you already know. But for those looking to move there to open up their own company, what advice would you actually give them?
Yeah, look, a comment first. I live in Sydney, I'm based in Sydney, but I'm fortunate to be able to travel the world, particularly to Silicon Valley, where I've got some business interests, particularly around Ninefold, but also up into Asia and other parts of the world, looking at emerging technologies, because Australia's a long way, as you know, from elsewhere, and all of us are keen to keep abreast of what's happening. And, you know, the advice I'd give to anyone looking to open a business, start a business, particularly if it's based around technology in Australia, is the same as pretty much I'd give them anywhere in the world. And I'll talk about some of the market specifics in a moment, but anyone in today's world should be looking at focus, that great old F word, as I call it. Really focus on your customers, and with some of the new technologies, such as Ruby on Rails and some of the platforms that we'll talk about, it is quite easily to test your business proposition, to spin up a proof of concept, to get it out early and to iterate, rather than sit there and we've all got to do research, but the best research is that which is real world, customer focused, MVP, minimum viable product or proposition. Mm-hmm. The other comment I'd make is, you know, Australians are early adopters of technology. As I said, we, being a long way from, perhaps other parts, Europe and the US, we tend to be self-sufficient. I read a statistic the other day that said our uptake of wearable technology is one of the highest in the world. And then over many years, our uptake of mobile technology and the like was certainly right up there with some of the most advanced countries. Mm-hmm. And a good sense of humour. I mean, we Aussies, we can't hide that. We tend to be very passionate about what we do, very passionate about the team, but try not to take the individual too seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was actually quite interested in from a business point of view, what would you say are the greatest opportunities for businesses in Australia right now?
Well, if you think about Australia, we've had very strong economy, even through the global financial crisis, mm-hmm. Partly because of conservative financial policies, but also because of a very large resource community which has underpinned our economy. So that the industries or the opportunities that are doing well here, anything that is in the financial sector, the education sector, the health sector, and these are, and particularly when we apply technology, emerging technologies across these industries, and obviously anything to do with e-commerce. They're perhaps the same as elsewhere in the world, but they are particularly the industries in Australia that are emerging and doing well.
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually. It seems like every day there's a new cloud and storage provider on the web. I'm curious to know why you started Ninefold and what makes it stand out from the crowd.
A couple of reasons, and we started Ninefold, as you mentioned before, in 2011, which was in many ways the early days of the cloud. We built it ourselves after quite a bit of market research, and as you said, I'm a director, chairman of Macquarie Telecom, and it was and is Macquarie Telecom that backs Ninefold, and in fact Ninefold is a wholly owned subsidiary. So backed by a telco with a proud history of data centres, managed hosting, it was an adjacency for that company, albeit through a separate brand and perhaps a separate culture, to spin off a business focused initially on infrastructure as a service, selling compute, storage and internet. And what then happened is our customers, which were typically and are typically the startups, the tech-savvy entrepreneurs, came onto the cloud, and we were built into 2 data centres here in Australia, owned by our parent Macquarie here in Sydney. But then we found our customers, primarily for latency and because their customers, our customers' customers, were in fact often in the US. We then built into a third-party data centre down in San Jose on the West Coast. So there we were, after a short amount of time, with an infrastructure as a service cloud, with data centres in Australia and then into the US. But like any good business, you have to iterate, you have to morph, and you have to pivot so that we continued to grow, and we moved up the stack, and the additional service layer that we built was to build our own platform as a service. So we then built that on top of our infrastructure, and today, as you know, we operate that platform both here in Australia, but more and more in the US, and particularly around the Silicon Valley area.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting choice that you went for, actually, because your Ninefold is focused on Ruby on Rails. I'm just curious of why you chose Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've built an app deployment platform, and the world, as you know, is about applications, and developers are happiest when they're coding, when they're shipping code, and when they're getting their code, their apps out into production. They are unhappiest when they're having to worry about DevOps and all the infrastructure that often goes with deploying their apps. So it was a reasonably straightforward decision to build a platform which enabled developers to quickly spin up their app. The notion is, Jamie, that we're a platform that ultimately is extensible and where we can deploy almost any app in any language. But going back to the F word that I used before, focus, I'm a big believer in focus. We chose Ruby on Rails. We believe it's the preeminent language of the web, and we have built out our first offering focused on Ruby on Rails. And again, the F word, targeting the communities in and around San Francisco and Silicon Valley. That's not to say that we aren't servicing, and we have customers all over Australia and particularly all over the US. We attend conferences in every part of the US, but heavily focused initially anyway on San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and the first offering is Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, you've actually grown quite considerably in the last 3 years. Like you said, you've expanded in to the US. So your main target was Australia, and you've grown. So I'm quite curious to know, like, were your next place will be? Somewhere in Europe or?
It's again a question we get asked. Ultimately, we will go where our customers take us.
Yeah.
We certainly have plans to build into another data center on the east coast of the US. But as we speak, some of our biz dev people are talking to customers and opportunities in the UK and in Europe. So, but look, there's a lot more for us to do in the US, but we are getting inquiries and getting customers, and we're a self-service model, pay only for what you use, credit card based. So we often don't know who our customers are, although we're passionate about the support we provide. But we can tell the geographic areas they're coming from, primarily the US, but from all over the world. So I guess, Jamie, watch this space. We'll see ultimately where our customers take us.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you expand into Manchester.
I think that when there's an Aussie game of cricket there, which I'm sure you follow, Test cricket in Manchester, isn't that one of the great sporting events?
Yeah, it's quite a big sporting event over here. So which lasts for weeks and weeks and weeks. So
and sometimes doesn't get a result.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Ruby was actually founded in 1995, and it's a simple to use and open source language, allowing devs to build frameworks like Ruby on Rails. Do you think it's important for providers like yourself to use more open source languages and frameworks?
It's interesting. The short answer is yes. I had the pleasure and the privilege of introducing Sir Tim BernersLee on his TBL Down Under tour, and I'm sure all of the listeners would know that Sir Tim, as he is known, was the founder of the World Wide Web, and his comment at the time was, "This is for everyone." And for someone who's been around technology a long time, I grew up in the days of proprietary systems where you were locked into a vendor's hardware, a vendor's operating system, and or a vendor's software. And I'm pleased to say those days are gone, so or largely gone. So the world of open source, open systems, such as Ruby on Rails, where the community owns it, and where the language may have been written as Ruby was by Mats, the Japanese software guru academic. Ultimately, it's the community who owns it, who gives it life, who commits to it and develops it. And it just means that software in particular can be so much more powerful if you've got open source repositories of code such as GitHub, of Bitbucket, etc., where people can build code and deploy it, but make it available to others.
Yeah.
And then have open source languages and frameworks such as Ruby on Rails. So it is definitely the way of today and the way of the future, and certainly something that Ninefold is absolutely committed to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about ease of use, isn't it, as well? And
yes, and it was interesting. We had Mats attend an event, a developer event, sponsored by Ninefold at our Silicon
He gave a talk, didn't he, at Ninefold?
He did.
Yeah,
he did, and he talked about it. And one of our developers, who's been around as long as I have, talked about how long it took to program in some of the old IBM 360, for anyone listening who remembers those days, and the power and the functionality of modern and the ease of use of modern languages. And Jamie, it's one of the reasons why we went with Ruby, because, as I said before, it's so easy to build an app and to do a proof of concept, get feedback from the market, and then iterate quickly, rather than perhaps years ago when I first went to university and learnt to code, where it took a long time to get any functionality out 2 years or into the market.
Yeah, I mean, like now at university, I don't think they teach, especially not in the UK, they don't actually teach frameworks. They still focus on the language. But I've had this question quite a few times come up in previous podcasts where we're always discussing which is better, to actually learn the language itself or just jump onto the framework. And to be honest, it is easier to learn the language because you'll have like a big understanding of how things work. But if you're looking to build something, it's easier to just dive in and get into a framework. And
it's a really good again, a good debate, and I've seen it every way. So that and I do think the more traditional educational facilities and universities aren't always going to be able to keep up with how fast some of this open source technology is moving.
Yeah.
So that, today there's coding schools, particularly for Ruby on Rails, popping up all over the world, aimed at getting new developers into the market. And often those developers, and I look at our own Ninefold developers, these are really smart, highly qualified people, but their base university tertiary education may be in something else. It could be in Southeast Asian politics for one, or sociology or communications or philosophy, and then they've gone and picked up some open source technology and away they go. And then you've got the other approach where they do a more traditional structured approach to computer science. And I mean, they've both got their place, but the days of just learning technology at university are well and truly past us.
Yeah. It's like you mentioned before, Ninefold was actually founded back in 2011, and it has grown considerably over the last few years to places in Australia and the United States. When you first started out, did you expect the demand to be so high, particularly in places like Australia, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jamie. Look, we did some market research, and we all of the indicators were that this was an emerging market and likely to be a hot market. So I wouldn't say it's been a total surprise. Nonetheless, it's pleasing to get confirmation of the early work that you've done. We, as I said, are backed by a very large telco, publicly listed. So everything we did from day one was commercial grade, enterprise grade, and we had an appropriate amount of funding. So while the growth, as you say, has been very, very solid, we did build the original infrastructure, cloud that we launched in 2011, and then the platform, which we did an MVP into the market in September of last year, and then a more commercial, fully functional release in May of this year, April, May of this year. Both the infrastructure and the platform were built to scale. I mean, that's what the cloud is about. That's what our business model is about. So, yes, exciting, pleasing. Sometimes, we've moved perhaps a little quicker than we thought, and certainly the morphing into the US. But again, good people and backed by Macquarie Telecom, I think, are the reason. The other comment I'd add in terms of opening up into a new market, again, in a connected world, we were able to locate and hire some good local people, initially working out of co-working spaces. It's the way of working has changed, and the ability with a lot of internet and connectivity and the World Wide Web to launch a business into another country, is I wouldn't say it's trivial, but it's a lot easier than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's quite an exciting journey as well, especially to expand into a different country. I mean, that'll be quite exciting to do. And because I was looking to Ninefold, and a big part of what Ninefold is performance. Performance is a vital part of any site or app. So without it, it actually gives users without performance, it actually gives users a disjointed experience, which ultimately makes them want to leave. So would you say that this is an important part, not just for Ninefold, but for every site on the web to actually focus on performance?
We believe that performance is quite fundamental to the success of our business, and it's quite fundamental to the success of our customers' business. Most of our customers are web-based businesses, and for them, response times, the customer experience is top priority, and that's not just about latency. And it's interesting, we talk to a lot of developers who spend a lot of time on the UX, on the UI, and just making sure their web site and the whole customer engagement is first class, world class. But as we point out to them, if the performance of the app on the underlying platform is not, and there's all sorts of statistics around to prove this, if that performance of the app is not consistently fast, it simply costs business because customers' attention is distracted. So, we call out performance. We're built onto our own infrastructure. We focus, at least in this early offering, on Ruby on Rails, and we're able to tune that stack for ultra-fast performance. Mm-hmm. And what we also call out, Jamie, it's not just about the average. It's not about the mean. In fact, that can be a distraction. We encourage people to look at the edge cases, because those edge cases typically are customers, real-life customers who may, in an averaging situation, not be seen, but their experience may not be a good one. So that performance is important. And interestingly, we're starting to attract the attention of some of the e-commerce platforms and sites. And there's a great open source e-commerce app called Spree, which is in fact written in Ruby. And we are, I would say, on a daily basis now, adding customers who use Spree to underpin their businesses because of the speed and the consistent performance they can get on our platform. So we encourage anyone who's running a web app, have a look at performance and all that performance means.
Yeah, I mean, you can. Like you just said, it's such an important aspect, and with customers today, well, users, they get distracted quite easily. I mean, I do when I'm on the web. If something doesn't load within a few seconds, I'm backing off then, and then that in my mind puts like a dirty image on the brand. Then I'm like, I'm not going to go back there because it was slow, so I'm just going to try and find someone else. And that's more evident now in today's market because it's so saturated, because there's so many other companies out there that just all do pretty much the same thing. So if that doesn't work, you go somewhere else. So I would say performance is a vital aspect of any site or app, really. So as I actually mentioned earlier, you're the director of iiNet, which is one of the leading internet service providers in Australia. And you're also the director of Macquarie Telecom, which is Australia's top managed hosting and telecommunications company. What was it like being a part of big businesses, then working on a much smaller one like Ninefold?
Look, a couple of comments, Jamie. Firstly, a lot of fun, Ninefold. I mean, a lot of hard work. But I, along with my colleagues, have spent my share of hours at booths pretty much all over the US and Australia and other parts of the world, handing out T-shirts, going to meetups, startup events, wearing the Ninefold T-shirt, which is quite prominent, and handing out beer and pizza, which I must say is the currency of the community, and working with some really smart younger people. I might say, by my standards these days, everyone is younger. At least that's what I say. So it is a lot of fun, and having the privilege to travel regularly to Silicon Valley and other parts of the US and the world, as opposed to perhaps the more traditional businesses of the larger companies you've mentioned, iiNet and Macquarie Telecom. But as I say, that they're not traditional either, because they are technology businesses. They disrupt, and they need to constantly reinvent themselves and to iterate. So one of the challenges and opportunities for any business, particularly if they're technology based, and particularly if they're large like Macquarie Telecom and iiNet, they've got to keep iterating themselves. So in both those companies, we're very outward focused. We look at market trends elsewhere in the world, of what's happening in technology. But the one thing all of those businesses have in common, Ninefold, iiNet and Macquarie Telecom, is a passion for customers, net promoter scores, and really trying to provide customer experience enabled by great technology. So, many similarities. I tend to wear jeans and T-shirt when I'm representing Ninefold, and perhaps something a little more traditional in the other companies, but they've all got this entrepreneurial, fast-moving flavour, because they have to in today's day and age.
Yeah, totally. Actually, because you mentioned before that you met Tim BernersLee, I was curious what it was like meeting him and what he told you.
Look, the first thing I'd say is a gentleman. For someone who has achieved so much, as I said in my introduction and then afterwards, I think he'd achieved, built the World Wide Web in his 30s, and as I said, most people would have been happy to say, well, that's enough for anyone. That's enough for 5 lives achievement. So he didn't stop there. He didn't go and play golf, but he's still as passionately involved today in open source, in the future of the web. I really bonded with him. We spent quite a bit of time talking. I've got pictures of he and I together, and I've sent them off to him, and we do keep in touch. He's a gentleman. For someone who's achieved so much, and an absolutely engaging speaker. So he filled large, the Sydney Town Hall and other large venues with people from all walks of life, and he is a very, very engaging speaker, but a gentleman and a nice guy to boot.
Oh, that's cool. So to finally wrap up, have you got any upcoming projects that you're excited to be working on, or things in the pipeline for Ninefold?
Look, Ninefold's constantly iterating. We are constantly building out our functionality. We keep really close to the communities, and they're guiding us in terms of the capability of the platform. We are very focused on Ruby, Ruby on Rails, but ultimately we will move into other areas, other services, other languages. The East Coast of the US is something that we're pretty focused on. And as I said before, Jamie, before too long, I expect that we will be a bit closer to where you are today, probably within the next 12 months.
Oh, that's cool. Well, it's been quite an honour and a pleasure talking to you, Peter. So thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Great, Jamie, and all the best to you and your listeners. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out more great podcasts over on CDNify.com/blog.